Hey guys, it's Kevin with my review for the rest of the season of Mr. Robot Season 3. And first of all, guys, I just want to say I have no idea why I got so behind on this show in the way I did. You guys know how much I adore Mr. Robot. It was not my intention to not finish Season 3 when it originally came out. I reviewed the first 2 episodes. In my review of the second episode, I said I planned to binge the rest of the season. I did, but back then, I was not reviewing TV shows in the way I was now, so I just, it was, I literally would go on, like, Microsoft Word and type out every single piece of dialogue and things like that, and that was very time-consuming. It was very time-consuming for sure, and that's why I just dropped that format altogether, because if I continued to do that, I'd never finish anything. So, obviously, I really wanted to finish Mr. Robot, and I knew that Season 4 was coming out, so I finally told myself I am gonna finish Season 3, and thank God I did, because, oh boy, we got a lot to talk about here. Without getting into too much, this might just be my favorite season of this show yet. I think they really did fire on all cylinders here, but it also is gonna be a different type of review from, how I normally do reviews for seasons of TV shows. It's going to be structured differently, mainly because I've already talked about the first 2 episodes of the season. I've already covered them as much as I possibly can. I've praised what I loved. You know, I was really happy with the way those reviews turned out. I even rewatched them after giving episodes 1 and 2 a second look, because I didn't want to go into Season 3 and just do like 3 through 10. I wanted to remember what happened in 1 and 2, so I rewatched both of those episodes, and I also rewatched my reviews respectively for them. And I'm happy with the way they turned out, so I'm not going to change anything there. This is going to be more of a rundown, what I liked, what I didn't like, and where I think they could be possibly going in Season 4, so we're just going to get right into it. So the first thing I think I really do want to talk about is unpredictability. I mean, this season, just like the rest of the show, went in so many unpredictable directions. There were so many places it went that I really wasn't expecting it to. And look, I mean, I might just be dumb because I'm the only person in Season 2 that did not suspect that Elliot was in prison. The rest of the world figured it out. I didn't, but this show has always surprised me on that level, and again, I might be stupid because the biggest surprise of the season for me is something that probably should have been quite obvious, and that, of course, is that White Rose was brainwashing Angela. You know, for a while, you can rewatch my review of episode 1 of season 3. I legitimately thought this show was going in a time travel direction. I thought maybe there was a possibility that that could have been true, that what Angela was saying to Elliot was, in fact, a real thing. But we realized very early on in this season that no, this is all bullshit. This is Angela being brainwashed, and I love this idea because it makes Angela a really fascinating character, because even though, yes, her and Elliot have this existing relationship, she's using that to her advantage, and White Rose herself is also using it to her advantage in the way that she is using this to manipulate Angela, you know, by talking about how her parents are going to come back and things like that, and this is making Angela think that she can trust White Rose, and it's yet another person that White Rose can reel in and get on her side and get her against, someone else to turn against Elliot in that way, and you can really see how genius White Rose is in doing that, but it also makes the penultimate episode of Season 2 far more necessary. If you guys remember, that was in 1 episode of the show where I genuinely did not know what the hell was going on, but now I think I have a much clearer idea of what was really happening here, in that this was all just brainwash. This was White Rose's way of getting Angela on her side, and again, I love this narrative because while Elliot can help Angela, and I've said before, I think of all the characters in the show, the only person that can really stop Angela is Elliot. Even he couldn't stop her. Even he couldn't shake this delusion within her. The entire season, she's believing that every single thing that happens doesn't matter, and you really do see how this takes a toll on her as a character, and my God, is Portia Doubleday so good as this actress. As this character. I do not see her get enough credit, but she is so good here, especially in the scenes where she has to be just so stone cold, and you can just tell how manipulated she's been. And the moment, especially when Angela's like flipping through the footage of what happened, and she keeps pressing the rewind button and basically saying like, "Oh, they're fine, nothing's happened to them." I mean, it's just it's such a terrifying scene. Not because of Angela saying it. That's not why it's terrifying. It's terrifying because you realize just how deeply White Rose has manipulated her, and how hard it seems to break her from that, and especially for Darlene, someone who was once friends with Angela, but that's very much been destroyed as well. It's just such a crushing scene to watch, and Portia Doubleday acted the hell out of that for sure. I love the way that was done, but man, was it fucked up. But again, it also just shows how much of a genius White Rose really is. It makes her a far more compelling villain. I was already very intimidated by White Rose in the first 2 seasons, but it was just a lot of talk. We didn't really know what White Rose was truly capable of. We just knew that White Rose was always seemingly one step ahead of these characters. I mean, hell, even in the first episode, she has that, of this season, she has that scene where she's like, you know, we might have to get rid of Elliot and things like that. So you knew something was brewing, but holy shit, I was not expecting it to go where it was. And just getting into it, I mean, the whole tragedy that ends up happening is probably the bleakest thing that's ever happened in this show. And the way that they led up to it, I thought was so masterful here. I loved the one-take episode, which, yes, it wasn't actually one take. It was like Birdman, where it was basically like a series of 30-second, tracking shots and things like that. But I feel like that makes it all the more impressive in that way, and I really love the way they were able to pull that off there. And I think that episode was so great. And again, that really starts this conflict between Elliot and Angela. These two are really at odds throughout the rest of the season, but I think they made a wise decision in not making Angela a villain. I feel like a lesser show would have done that, but they don't make her a villain. They make her more of a victim, someone who is susceptible to White Rose's manipulation in that way. And I think they did a really good job with that. And again, seeing what she had to go through with like her mother and things like that, and her realizing that her mother was dying. I mean, just such a tragic moment in that way. And her taking all of her aggression out on E-Corp, you really do get to see that here. I mean, Angela is so intent on just making sure that E-Corp pays for what they did, and that moment where Elliot realizes, you know, that Angela is the one that's been manipulating him, because even though Darlene, yes, Darlene did hack him, and Darlene was working with the FBI, which, I mean, we'll get into that. There's a lot of great stuff they do with those two as well. I like that he has that realization that Angela's been the one that's manipulating him, and that scene where he's trying to reel her in and you realize that there really is no saving her. It's just so tragic. But I like that they also wisely kept what was actually going to happen to E-Corp until the final moments of episode 6. And when Elliot realizes that he inadvertently caused it, it just is that much bleaker. Mainly because we know how much guilt Elliot feels for pretty much everything that has happened, but he has never felt this much guilt before, especially when it comes to that attack. I mean, after all of those E-Corp buildings are destroyed and things like that, I mean, it was so emotionally crushing. And to go from that, and then Frederick and Tanya, and then having that whole episode with Trenton and Mobley, and them sort of misleading us into thinking that maybe they're going to be okay. Maybe they're going to be able to get out of this. You know, Leon is someone that they can trust. You know, maybe he's going to be able to save them in that way. And us realizing that the whole episode is basically us seeing them led to their death. It was even more tragic. And the moment where they're forced to kill themselves, I mean, they really get into just how fucked up the Dark Army really is this season. I think they did some masterful work there, and just seeing how this affects Elliot and just how much he's placing blame onto himself, going as far as to feeling like he has to conduct a funeral for Mobley because nobody else wants to. Everyone feels Mobley's like this terrorist, and then trying to bond with like Trenton's brother. I mean, it was just really tragic to see, and I think they did some really excellent work there. They took two characters that were essentially, you know, they were still vital to the show, but we kept forgetting that they were there, and they made them that much more purposeful. You know, F Society was introduced in the show as sort of like the hero, in the sense that F Society was going to be the one to take down E Corp and things like that, but now we're at a point where we're realizing F Society really, in a way, is the biggest tragedy of them all. I mean, every single thing that F Society wanted to do has pretty much, yes, Elliot facilitated a lot of it, and Mr. Robot did a lot of the work as well. But every single thing that they did, it's only led to what White Rose wanted to happen. And just seeing White Rose basically get her way for a while could have been really boring, honestly. It could have been really boring to see, but they make it so riveting in that way. And, the moment where Dom is looking at all of that evidence and she just has that realization that she's going to get away with it, that they can't stop White Rose. It's just such a soul-crushing moment, and this season really did deliver on that for sure. And again, I know I'm very scattered here with all my thoughts, but again, it really does all go back to that manipulation with Angela and how she really, all of this was done as a way to distract everyone. All of this was done as a distraction from the real problem, and that is whatever White Rose has brewing. We still don't know what that really is all about, but I really loved where this ended up going, and I think it made this a far more emotional season than I really was expecting. Season 3 started out, you thought it was going to be a season of payoff, and it was, but man, was there a lot of emotion before that. But of course, the other thing to really talk about is the stuff with Elliot and Darlene, which I think this season did some excellent work since Elliot and Mr. Robot are not on good terms throughout most of the season. We really got to see Elliot interact with pretty much everyone else, and this is something we didn't really get to see in Season 2 because he was separate. He was in prison throughout a lot of it, so I like that a lot of this season was contingent upon that relation between Elliot and Darlene. It showed just how important of a relationship that really was, but also how much Darlene cares about protecting Elliot. I mean, in Season 2, she became the literal embodiment of everything she hated. She was a major leader of a corporation, and we know that she hates that. She doesn't like corporations. She doesn't like capitalism and all that stuff. That's something that she can't stand, and the fact that she's doing all of this just to protect Elliot and going as far as to become a character witness, for Dom and things like that, and all of the stuff that she did, I mean, she really put her life on the line this season. And the moment where, obviously we knew from episode 2 that she hacked Elliot and things like that, and seeing where that ended up going with Dom, again, is definitely not what I was expecting at all. But I like that, again, at the end of the day, Darlene really was just trying to protect him. And Dom this season, I mean, they really did a great job in showing how Dom is a good cop, and a lot of people have been debating that, but I think Season 3 very much confirmed Dom is a good cop. She's very good at what she's doing. She's just with the wrong people. There's too many Dark Army affiliates surrounding her that once she's gotten involved, she's just gotten way too deep. Case in point, Santiago. I kind of had an inkling for a while that there was something off about him. The fact that basically anything that Dom said involving the Dark Army or White Rose, he would just shut away. He would try to make it seem like, she's losing focus or that she's not focusing on the real enemy here, which is Terrell. And him being Dark Army was definitely not surprising for me, but it also makes Dom's story that much more compelling because we realize it's not that she's this great cop amongst a bunch of idiots who aren't listening to her. It's that she's really one of the only people that isn't being manipulated by the Dark Army and is trying to do what she can to stop the Dark Army in that way. And I thought that was a really interesting revelation for sure. And her and Darlene hooking up, oh my god, that was not something that I was expecting at all, but it actually really does make a lot of sense. And again, Dom as a character, I thought was even better this time around. I thought Season 2 did a really great job introducing her as someone who was really lonely and someone who closes herself off and things like that. But by seeing that, we see why she would turn to someone like Darlene, because Darlene has been just as hurt as her. She's lost Cisco. She really hasn't felt the same ever since, and seeing those two hook up, but also seeing Darlene basically just do that to hack into the Sentinel, it made it that much more crushing. And I think they did a good job with, again, all the buildup with Darlene and Elliot, because I feel like if they hadn't done that, Darlene doing this, it would have been a character assassination. It really would have. It could have ruined Darlene as a character, but it really does show just how ruthless she is to make sure that every single one of Elliot's plans goes the way that it needs to be. And I love seeing them, going back into like the F Society hideout and things like that. All of that stuff was so great, and I think they did a really great job building up to that moment for sure. But a big concern of mine going into this season was what they were going to do with Terrell. It's just after season 1, he really wasn't in season 2 all that much. We saw him in the finale, and I just wasn't sure how exactly they were going to do this. How are they going to catch us up on everything he's been up to since season 1? But his episode was actually one of my favorites, and it makes Terrell a far more compelling character. I mean, earlier in the show, yeah, we have discovered that Terrell is not really a villain in that sense, but this season especially, you really do see how he also is just a victim of the Dark Army in that way, and you really do see how this has affected him. The fact that he was manipulated by Elliot's, of course, Mr. Robot, and he has this crippling obsession with him. We start to realize, he has this god complex to him, and he really thought that him and Elliot could have achieved something great because of that. But of course, all that Mr. Robot was doing was making sure that stage 2 would fall into place in that way, and he wasn't really interested in working with Terrell. It was just something that he pitched to him, and you see how this just eats away at Terrell throughout the entire season. I mean, all the stuff he did with Irving, and how Irving manipulated him, and how, he was manipulated by Santiago and all of the Dark Army in that way, was just really crushing to see. Like I said, every character this season really is pushed to their breaking point in that way, and Terrell especially. And the one thing that I was actually really happy about is that it actually does give Joanna's death a much bigger relevance in that way. We could, and I think this season very much gives us the indication that Derek was part of the Dark Army. I mean, the way that Santiago phrases it and things like that, I do think Derek was Dark Army. They didn't outright confirm it, but it very much seems that way, because Derek is the one that killed Joanna, and we know that he was shady for a while, so I think it's pretty obvious that he was very much involved with the Dark Army, and I like that Terrell doesn't really get to deal with this. He just has to accept the fact that his wife is now dead, and he has to move on from it all, and he also realizes that even though, yes, he's wanted this position at E-Corp for a while, he's able to come to the conclusion that even if he works for Price, it's not going to mean all that much. His relevancy is kind of gone, and even though, yes, he is exonerated as a criminal, he's also basically irrelevant. I mean, nobody really cares about Terrell anymore, and it makes me wonder where he's really going to go in Season 4. He pretty much is a failure. He's lost everything at this point, and even though he was exonerated, I mean, his reputation has been completely destroyed. It's just really tragic to watch, and I never thought that I'd care this much for someone like Terrell, who in Season 1 we just thought was like this dickish character, and yeah, he definitely did have that to him, but stripping that away entirely, this is someone who was basically, whose life was destroyed by the Dark Army, and I think he is going to find a way to, he's going to need to find a way to recover, and I don't know if he's going to be able to. I feel like White Rose has him exactly where she needs him at this point, and I don't really know where exactly that's going to go. I guess we'll just have to see, because, he very much is a puppet to them at this point, and I don't really know what's going to end up happening there, especially with the way that the finale plays out, which we'll get to in a little bit. But just to sum it up, I was very impressed with what they did with Terrell this season. I think he went on a really interesting journey. Martin Wallström has truly never been better as this character, and I love basically everything they did with him. I was very concerned with where he was going to go, because again, he wasn't in Season 2 that much. It was focused mainly on the Joanna and all the stuff that she was doing. But having him now, return and having him be a central character again, I'm really happy that they brought him back, because I think there's some really interesting things in store for that character, especially since he now knows that the position he's wanted at E-Corp was worthless, and even though, yes, he is back there, and things like that, the CTO position doesn't really mean much of anything, and I mean, we saw this, in episode 9, the way it started out with that flashback, I didn't really know what it really was all boiling down to, but it really does mean that even though Tyrell has always thought that he could be the leader, in reality, that's not what he is. Price is the one that is always going to be leading E-Corp in that way, and even as much as Tyrell might want it, it's not really going to mean much of anything. He's just working there. It's just another position, and the one thing that he's wanted doesn't really mean much of anything, and it's a very tragic shift for sure. And again, it's one that could, I think in a lesser show, it could be really disappointing. But again, considering that Tyrell is someone who has been on this god complex for a while, and he's been latching on to being the leader of something, the fact that it's been taken away from him entirely is just really tragic, and I don't really know where this character is going to go, but I'm very intrigued for sure. And just the moment where Elliot is talking to Tren's brother and how he kind of like restores this faith in him was really great to see, because for a while, I mean, this season was nothing but just constant tragedy after constant tragedy. So I like that we finally did get some sense of hope, just something that could bring Elliot back on top, because we knew for a while he'd been in this stump, and I like that he finally realized that there was a way to fix this, and him manipulating the Dark Army into thinking there was a stage 3 when there wasn't actually a stage 3, you knew wasn't going to go in his favor. But I like that he at least did something. It shows that even when Elliot is at his lowest point, he's always, he's never going to quit. Like, we knew that Elliot wasn't actually going to kill himself, not just because he's the main character, but just because that's not who Elliot actually is. Elliot isn't just someone who just flat out quits. He's always trying to work on something. He's always trying to find a way, even if it seems impossible, even if there doesn't seem like there is a solution, he's always trying to come up with a solution, and we definitely do get to see that this season, and that's something I really did love for sure. And the way that things concluded, I mean, with like Darlene being kidnapped and things like that, I really didn't know where the finale was going to head. Which, I mean, I guess I'll just get into it. The finale was fucking nuts, as it's always been for Mr. Robot, but I think what separates this finale from the other ones we've had is there is a sense of satisfaction here. There's a sense of finality to this finale that there hasn't been in seasons 1 and 2. Seasons 1 and 2, there's just been tons of uncertainty. It's been riddled with nothing but questions, and we actually did get quite a lot of answers here, but still not enough that the show's ending or anything. There's still one more season left to go, but it very much does seem like we're setting up the end game, so much so to the point where I'm genuinely surprised that people didn't think that season 4 would be the last season, because at least watching it back, it very much seems like this season is building towards there. It very much seems that way, and I think overall they did some really excellent work here. So obviously we knew that Darlene wasn't going to die. I didn't think that they would end up killing Darlene here, but the way that things went down was definitely not what I was expecting. Basically, we get to see almost every single character interact here. You know, we get Darlene, we get Dom, we get Elliot, even Leon, Grant, all of them are being confronted, all of them are in this one barn, and basically the plan is that White Rose is just going to dispense of Darlene and Elliot entirely, mainly because of the fact that she knows that they are onto her. She's trying to make sure that whatever her plan is, it ends up, going into full effect, and she needs to get rid of them. So I like the fact that that didn't turn out the way that she wanted to. It shows that even though, yes, White Rose is relentless in that way, and definitely is a villain that always seems to be getting her way, Elliot always finds a way to foil her plans in some way, and the way he did that, it was so good. I love the moment where he's talking to Grant, and he tells him about how, I know every single password to, like, what you've been doing. I know everything that White Rose is playing. Like, he's always one step ahead of them, and Grant just realizes in that moment, holy shit, I've been caught, and he basically just kills himself right then and there, because, and this is something we've come to realize, is that if you're involved in the Dark Army and people uncover, who you are and your identity and things like that, all that kind of stuff, you're no use to them. You might as well just die, and I knew that there was probably going to be deaths here, but I did not expect Grant to be someone to die. Grant was someone who basically was the biggest, the most trusted confidant and the most loyal to White Rose. I did not think that Grant was going to die here, but the moment where he pulled that trigger, I mean, I'm really interested in seeing who's going to take his place now, because obviously someone's got to take his place, and I don't know where that's going to go. But I was also not expecting Santiago to die, but I love the way that this went down, because even though, yes, Santiago is part of the Dark Army, he's always had that threat where, he has to make sure his mother isn't affected and things like that. And when he captures Dom and Darlene, you can see that he genuinely does care for them. He doesn't like the fact that he's a part of this. He doesn't like the fact that he's had to be subservient to White Rose. And the only reason why he was trying to, turn away from betraying them is because he knew what it would lead to. He knew that this would lead to him being found out. And since he is found out, we finally get to see Irving just completely unleash, and this was an amazing moment, and really is a testament to Bobby Cannavale as an actor. I feel like, yes, he does get the credit that he deserves, but I don't think enough people talk about just how good he is as an actor, and moments like this really do show, and he was such a good character actor this season. Irving was so different from any other character that Bobby Cannavale's ever played. He was so soft-spoken and just very pleasant in that way. Even violent stuff he did, he always did it with a smile. He always seemed to have this can-do attitude to him in that way, and it made him that much more creepier. You knew there was always something that he was repressing, and finally seeing him let that out when he's like wailing on Santiago, holy shit, I have never been more scared of Bobby Cannavale in my life, but that was such a great moment. And basically, because Santiago's now dead, Dom has no choice but to become the new, the new double agent for the Dark Army, and she doesn't have a choice. He basically threatens her entire family, says, if this doesn't go the way that we want it to, your entire family's going to be killed, and this is just such a devastating moment between that, but also seeing that she genuinely did care for Darlene, but now she's not willing to accept an apology. Yes, you can read it as she's trying to do that because that's what the Dark Army wants her to do, but I genuinely do think that she has this unbridled rage against Darlene at this point. I don't think this is something that can be repaired, and I think even if Darlene tries, I don't think it's possible. I think Darlene has fucked with Dom way too much, and I think she got Dom to open up in a way that Dom hasn't been able to do. And again, Dom is similar to Elliot in the sense where she doesn't open herself up to a lot of people. Elliot doesn't open himself up to really anyone except Darlene and, a few other people. Even the audience themselves, I mean, he's always been an unreliable narrator in that way. Dom is similar in the sense where she only opens herself up to a few people, and the fact that she did open herself up to Darlene, who then went and betrayed her, you can see how this has really hurt her, but that combined with seeing basically the person that was her boss die in front of her and just be killed so many times, but also now having to be subservient to the Dark Army, I mean, Dom is in a really rough position, and to be honest, I don't know if she survives this show. I really don't. I would be very surprised if Dom actually does end up surviving. I think her death is imminent at this point, especially knowing just how adamant White Rose is about things going her way. I mean, one little slip-up, and Dom could just die right then and there. I would not be surprised if Dom dies within, maybe even the first 5 episodes of Season 4. I really wouldn't, because at this point, we know what White Rose is capable of. We know how just savage the Dark Army really is when it comes to this stuff. And I just don't know if Dom is going to live past this show. I just don't know if I see that happening, but I guess we'll have to see. But again, one thing's for sure, there is no repairing this friendship between Darlene and Dom. That is very much severed, and I think we definitely saw that here. So all of that happens, and that's not even the biggest moment of the entire episode. Yes, obviously, Dom now becoming an affiliate for the Dark Army is definitely a scary moment. Elliot saving Darlene is big, but there's 2 other really big things to talk about. First of all is Angela. We knew eventually somehow she would have to be, she would have to break out of this manipulation. Someone would have to be able to fix that. Someone would have to be able to finally get her to recognize just how villainous White Rose really is. And I was not expecting it to be Price. I really wasn't. But I love where they end up going with this, where, you know, Price and White Rose were just at each other throughout the entire season. You know, White Rose basically owned Price, you know, got him away from E-Corp and things like that. He's no longer working for them, which is crazy to think about, that Price is not involved with E-Corp anymore. But again, it just really shows how powerful White Rose really is. But that moment where he's talking to Angela, every single interaction between them makes so much more sense now. We essentially find out that Price is actually Angela's biological father, and this is why he's had this care for her. This is why he's always made it his mission to make sure things go the way she wants it to go, because he himself doesn't want to be that monster that he's always been viewed as. I love the moment where he talks to her about how, you know, he was in love with her mother, and her mother always viewed Price as a monster in that way, and how he was disowned from the family, and that's why Angela has never had any interaction with him till now. But it really is this one moment of humanity for Price. This is probably the most human he's ever been, and Price is always someone who, he's always had this very vitrolic side to him, where he rarely expresses any sort of emotion, and you know, every single line, I mean, you were just so threatened by him. But now that E-Corp is really no longer a villain, I mean, they still are, definitely, they still aren't the best of people, but they're nothing compared to what the Dark Army has done. It really does show just how human Price really is, and I like that he's the one to finally break Angela of her delusion. And when she just breaks down, realizing that she basically caused all of this, it's just such a tragic moment. But I think now what's going to happen is Price is going to become, you know, part of the heroic side of things. I think he's going to try to take White Rose down. I think he has an even bigger vendetta against White Rose now, and he's going to do what he can to try to turn things around for Angela, because Angela's at her lowest point at this point, you know, lowest point, you know, at this time, and I think that Price is going to be the one to really fix things here. So it's a good way of keeping Price in the show, but also giving him a much larger purpose than we were expecting. I like this twist a lot more than if he was, like, obsessed with Angela. That's where they kind of made us think it was going to go, but now it makes a lot more sense, and I'm interested in seeing really what they're going to ultimately do with that. I do still think that there is more to the interaction between Angela and White Rose. I don't think White Rose is quite done with Angela yet. I think there's more going on there for sure. But I think that Price is really going to help her out here. And I think a lot of Season 4 is going to be them dealing with this revelation for sure. I'm very excited to see where all of that's headed. And I think that's a very interesting idea. But I think the best idea of this entire episode is that Elliot and Mr. Robot have finally made amends. And this was something that I was very happy about. You know, for a lot of this show, you know, Elliot's treated Mr. Robot as a negative, as a parasite in that way. Someone who, anytime he manifests, just the worst possible shit happens. He always fucks Elliot over. So I like that Elliot is now coming to the realization that, yes, Mr. Robot is evil, but he, similar to E-Corp, is that necessary evil that he needs to take E-Corp down. And also seeing that he actually wasn't pushed by Edward is an amazing reveal. It recontextualizes a lot of that relationship. We always thought that this was a negative relationship, where Edward was always just a terrible father to Elliot in that way. But now realizing that this was yet another thing that Elliot seemingly forgot, stemming, and it's similar to, like, in Season 1, when he forgot that Darlene was his sister. It's similar to that, and Darlene telling him, like, what happened here. I very much do believe her. I do think that this was that he himself tried to jump out of the window. He was not pushed by his father, and that he instead was kind of coaxed maybe by Mr. Robot, or maybe he was just suicidal in that way, that he actually did try to jump out the window. And I'm interested in seeing really where that's going to go. There's a lot that they can go into with that for sure, but it really does show just how great of a sister Darlene really is to Elliot in that way, and how, even though, yes, she withheld this from him, she made sure that she revealed it at the best time possible. And this is really, I think, the best time she needed to do that. She knows what the relation between Elliot and Mr. Robot has been at this point. She knows it's very contentious. I mean, she, this season, had interactions with Mr. Robot of him trying to turn against Elliot, but at the same time, all the things that Mr. Robot was doing, he ended up being just as vulnerable as Elliot, because he himself was also very much manipulated by the Dark Army and found out about all of their evil doings and things like that. So by doing this, and them teaming up, this finally will give them a way to take them down. I think Elliot, he can't do it alone. He needs Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot is that trusted companion. They just needed to work something out, and I think they're finally at a point where they're going to be able to take them down, and I can't wait to see where that's going to go. And I think that was a really great moment, and them stopping the 5-9 hack, I've heard many people say, oh, it undoes all of the show, and it really doesn't, because remember, 5-9, yes, while Elliot wanted this, White Rose also did. White Rose wanted this to happen so she could cause the demise of E-Corp. She could cause the demise of basically the entire, she could cause the global crisis to happen. Every single tragedy that has happened in the show and every single event that has taken place has been orchestrated pretty much by White Rose, and Elliot just didn't realize it. Elliot just had the same ideas, and White Rose was the one who was encouraging him to do it, and basically him now working with Mr. Robot and them undoing 5-9, now suddenly I think White Rose is not nearly as, I mean, she's still invincible in that way. She still very much has gotten her way, but it shows that Elliot is not going down without a fight, and I'm very excited to see the way that goes down for sure. I'm very excited to see where that ends up heading. But of course, I'm sure the big question on all of your minds is, what do I think of the post-credit scene? Well, I think it's a really great idea, actually. I really do. I've heard some people say it feels very tacked on, but I think it actually makes a lot of sense. Remember, we're not watching a TV show. We're watching a 4-act movie in that way, really. I mean, that Mr. Robot was supposed to be a movie. This is all happening within the same year, remember? So it's actually not that far-fetched to think that Vera is still out there and that Vera is actually going to help them out. And I don't think Vera is going to end up being this villain. I think he's going to be on a revenge path. I think that is going to happen. I think he is going to be going after Elliot in that way, because, I mean, the last time we saw Vera was when he killed Shayla, obviously, and that hasn't really been something that's brought up until now. It's something that happened, and then Elliot had to deal with it, and then basically we've moved on from it. So this really brings things full circle, but either he's going to be working with Elliot and Darlene, he's gonna see, what White Rose is doing, and he's going to want to conspire against her, or he's going to see what White Rose is doing, realize that White Rose is on the path of destroying Elliot. Maybe he needs to ally with her. Maybe he's going to be the new Grant. I mean, there are many possibilities for where they can go with that, but either way, it's very up in the air. I love the fact they brought this character back. It really does overcomplicate things and really does, again, just really set up the final season really well. Ultimately, Season 3 of Mr. Robot is basically everything I love about the show. The intensity is taken to a whole new level that really hasn't been explored before, but especially seeing the interworkings of what White Rose is planning and things like that, because we still don't know what she's doing, and I'll get more into that in, like, my Season 4, my review of the first episode of Season 4 and things like that. But we still don't know what she really is planning out, and I'm excited to see where that ends up going for sure. I'm also terrified to see what she could possibly be doing, because I don't think that her agenda is something that, I don't think her agenda is something that's going to greatly benefit Elliot, Darlene, or any of them at all, but I'm excited to see where that's going to go. I'm really excited to see how this Angela and Price revelation ends up going. I think that's really going to change a lot of that story for sure. I don't know where Vera's going to go. Obviously, Dom being a part of the Dark Army is really scary to think about, and I don't really know if she's going to get out of this season, out of this series alive. I really don't see that happening. But I do love the fact that Elliot and Mr. Robot are teaming up now. I'm excited to see where that's going to go. Leon also being on their side is not surprising. He's been an ally of Elliot's for a while, and I like the fact that he is probably going to help them out as well. Irving not being in this show is fine. Bobby Cannavale is an actor that's in very high demand. I can understand they can only get him for as long as they can, but I do think he is going to make a reappearance. I mean, I didn't think Leon was going to come back. We certainly didn't think Vera was going to come back, so I think there's a possibility that Irving does come back within the final season, but I guess we'll have to see the way that turns out. And look, as I've said before, this is a show that's very hard to predict what's actually going to go down. Maybe everything I'm saying isn't what's actually going to happen. You know, maybe Vera is actually going to ally with Elliot and Darlene. Maybe Terrell is actually going to end up, you know, with the Dark Army or something like that. I mean, we really don't know where this show is going at this point. I mean, the Dark Army owns a bunch of these characters. Terrell, Dom, they're basically puppets at this point, so we don't know where that really is going to go. But again, it just makes for some really compelling television overall. Either way, Mr. Robot Season 3 is pretty much everything I loved about the show. The intensity, character motivations, and just overall scope it was taken to all new heights. The emotion especially has never been this brutal before. It was so much more tragic than the other seasons, but really did show these characters at their breaking point, but also seeing how this can fix them, how this can help them out again. Characters like Terrell, Angela, Elliot, Darlene, all of these characters were very much pushed to their breaking point, but it really sets in motion where season 4 is going to go. It is officially everyone versus White Rose at this point. Maybe Vera as well. We don't really know, but it's basically everyone versus White Rose, and and the Dark Army, and I'm very excited to see where that ends up going for season 4. Everything this season did, it just reminds me why this is probably the best show on TV right now. It's so complex. There's a show I just endlessly love to talk about. The performances, I mean, Rami, Malek, Portia, Doubleday, Carly Chaikin, Michael Cristofer, Christian Slater, Grace Gummer, everyone was at the top of their game this season. There wasn't a single performance that didn't work for me. And even things like Joanna's death, though I don't think it was timed the best, ultimately, it served much more of a purpose than I really was expecting. It made Terrell a far more sympathetic character in that way, and I think they did some excellent work there. White Rose has truly never been, it's truly one of the most terrifying villains I've seen in a very long time. I think they're doing some really excellent work with her as a character. Just everything about this season might just be the strongest season of Mr. Robot yet, although it doesn't really say much considering how much I've praised the show before, and just like the first 2 seasons, I am going to give this season of Mr. Robot overall an A+. It feels so good to finally be caught up on one of the best shows on TV, maybe the best show on TV right now. But either way, guys, let me know what you guys saw this season overall. Love your thoughts in it. Of course, moving forward, I will be reviewing weekly episodes of Mr. Robot. Definitely look forward to that. This is a show that, again, I talked to people about this even when I was binging it. I hate having to binge this show. I really do, because it's just a show I love getting to talk about. I love getting to theorize about. I love getting to see where, like, Sam Esmail's head is at and things like that. It's just a show that I just love to dissect, and having to binge it, as fun as it was, it's a show that I love to just let sink in that way, and I'm glad that I can finally do that again moving forward. But either way, guys, I apologize that this review took so long. I don't know why that ended up happening, but that definitely will not be the case for the following season, so definitely look forward to that. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.